I think this might be the yikesiest thing she's ever said, but I do still kind of agree with her, but not fully, and I'm going to explain why. So I know it's kind of ridiculous for me to be just so quick to talk about anything ContraPoints related on my channel and on stream here. It's a little funny, all right? It's a little fun. I get it, ContraPoints simp Xanderhall, of course. But no, I do think that ContraPoints being like the largest left-wing YouTuber, as far as I'm aware, is pretty damn, it's pretty damn relevant when something goes on with her. And she tweeted just recently, yesterday, I think, like last night, probably the spiciest tweet she's made in a while. And obviously, she had a bit of a cancellation over it. And for the first time, I think ever, I'm not going to be making fun of the people canceling ContraPoints. I'm going to be reading the tweet that got ContraPoints in trouble and giving you guys my opinion on it, because I think it underlies a much larger topic, and I really want to talk about that. Okay? So here's ContraPoints Twitter. All right? I think you're all quite familiar with it at this point. Anyway, if we scroll down here, you can see she's been, doing a little bit of meme posting here, and stop gatekeeping breedability, But you can see there's not really any, nothing crazy here. Nothing that's, all that cancelable here, Like, nothing crazy. Well, that is because she has deleted the tweet that has caused so much ire to be sent her way these last, 12 hours. Thankfully, my boy Vosh went ahead and archived the tweet. Why'd she delete this banger? And, Natalie Wynn, at ContraPoints. Gen Z queer people are hard to figure out. They're like, I'm an asexual slut who loves sex. You don't have to be trans to be trans. Casual reminder that heterosexuality doesn't make your gayness any less valid. Whew. What are your thoughts, chat? Can we do a poll? Hey, Winston. Winston, see, do you mind doing a poll on based or cringe on this one? I want to see what everybody in the chat thinks. I want to see how many 14-year-olds we have in chat. Most people say based. Now I have a question. How many of you are just saying based because it's ContraPoints? Come on, guys. Come on. This is a nuanced discussion to be had around this take. And as biased as I am in favor of ContraPoints, I'm going to try to go into this as unbiased as possible, because I think this tweet might actually be one of the most legitimate cancellations she's had. I think this might be the yikesiest thing she's ever said, but I do still kind of agree with her, but not fully, and I'm going to explain why. So, I'm trying to figure out how I want to go, best go about doing this, but I think just reading over the tweet and cutting it up into pieces and explaining what I think the intent was behind this tweet would be a good way to start. And then from there, we can, try to see if we can justify and attack the position, okay? So here it is. Gen Z queer people, so, young LGBT people, very active on Twitter, very radical, young LGBT people, tend to be kind of Wokescoldy, or at the very least, very... they cringe post on TikTok and Twitter, okay? You know the type of people I'm talking about. They're not necessarily Wokescolds or anything, but you know when you see one of their posts on Twitter that they are no older than 15. Oh, hey, JXC says, if you're going to make a take like this, Twitter's not the place. True. We'll get to that in a moment, JXC. You need to be able to talk on it enough to explain exactly what you mean. Yeah, this is the biggest problem with Twitter. It incentivizes you to just tweet any sort of errant thought that comes flying into your head, and it prevents you from being able to type out your full take with as much context that would allow people to lend your take charitability as possible. So she's talking about these Gen Z LGBT people who say things like, I'm an asexual slut who loves sex. Now, I have to admit, I have heard this take before, and the reason why ContraPoints seems to be saying this is because from a surface-level perspective, at least for a lot of older LGBT people who've kind of over the years come to an understanding about what these words meant, this is an oxymoron of a sentence. As far as most people are aware, as far as I'm even aware, asexual means you are not sexually attracted to people. There's aromantic people and asexual people. And asexual people, typically, at least from my understanding, thank you, are not sexually attracted to people. However, they may be romantically attracted to people, which is not the same. And then obviously aromantic is the other way around, right? So on a surface level, it seems like, okay, yes, this is an oxymoron. You don't have to be trans to be trans. Now, this, I think, is the most damning part of this tweet. Okay, I think this is the most damning part of this tweet. Because this sounds like a dog whistle used by people like Blair White, Rose of Dawn, and, you know, you guys know the lineup of people that I'm discussing here, who won't say, you need dysphoria to be trans. Instead, they'll say, you need to be trans to be trans. It sounds like that kind of dog whistle. You know what I mean? You guys know what I mean by this, right? Like how the right will sort of like, and just people who generally hold pretty shitty opinions, instead of saying what they actually believe, they'll make like a presumption and then base a dog whistle off of that. You know what I mean? So it kind of comes off like she's making a dog whistle about how young LGBT people think that non-dysphoria experiencing trans people are valid, when that's completely ridiculous. That's kind of the way it comes off. I don't think that's what she meant. I'm pretty sure she specifically, in the past, said she doesn't believe that you need dysphoria to be trans. I don't believe she has.
A few months ago, I even made a 30-minute video called Trans Trenders, which uses character dialogue to show what I think are the shortcomings of transmedicalism. But there's still hundreds of people on Twitter saying that I'm true scum who hates non-binary people.
And then the final little meme here. Casual reminder that heterosexuality doesn't make your gayness any less valid. I have seen this take. Okay? I have unironically seen young lefties on Twitter saying that you don't need to be, that you can be heterosexual and still gay. I have seen that take on Twitter. Is that biphobic? I do not believe that ContraPoints, of all people, is dog-whistling anti-bisexual rhetoric, okay? Do you really think that ContraPoints here is dog-whistling her underlying position that she thinks that bisexual people aren't really gay? Do you think that's what she thinks? Do you think that's what she means? ContraPoints thinks that bi people and pan people aren't gay. Do you really think she thinks that? Of course not. If you are even somewhat aware of ContraPoints' content, you know that's not what she means, okay? It would be a gross misrepresentation of her ideas if that's what you try to take this as. However, I'll admit, this is Twitter. She's a large public figure. The words she says and how she chooses to use them and which words she chooses to use do matter. I'm willing to defend ContraPoints quite strongly and vehemently when it comes to people taking her out of context, refusing to watch her videos, and instead reading... You know they do this, right? The Wokescolds? The Wokescolds have admitted they don't watch ContraPoints' videos. They go out of their way to read the script. They don't watch her videos. They read the script. Because if they read the script, they won't hear sarcasm or obvious jokes or tone. They can just take a screen cap of a line from her video with, like, because if you take a clip of the video and she's doing it in her sarcastic voice that everyone knows is her sarcastic joke voice, no one will take it seriously. But if you cut out a section, like a little, like, section of the script of her saying something that would be problematic outside of the context of the video, then you can convince a bunch of Wokescold 14-year-olds on Twitter that she hates non-binary people, for example, or something like that, right? They love to do that kind of shit. I will defend ContraPoints vehemently against these kinds of attacks. However, I'm actually going to criticize her a little bit here. But then I'm going to defend her. Because I do overall think there is a decent point made here. Alright. Here's my criticism. ContraPoints of all people should definitely know better than to have tweeted this. Okay? This was like tweeting a ticking time bomb on Twitter. I hope to God she was drunk. I really do. I hope she was like tipsy and had like a funny joke or like a funny meme that came to her mind, so she tweeted it. And were she on stream or making a video, she would make this same argument but in a much better worded way. It is Twitter after all, and you know how it is. But she definitely should have been able to see this coming, okay? She definitely should have been able to see that this would get her canceled. However, let's talk about the actual argument that she's making here and discuss the validity of that argument. So, to summarize what she's saying here, she's basically saying that a lot of Gen Z queer people are very, very radical and they have an activist mindset, and they're extremely radical. They've sort of like, and we do this to an extent. I do this to an extent, right? Like, I'm kind of like a little bit on board with the gender abolitionism stuff. I don't know if I'm fully on board with it, but I'm certainly more receptive to it than like a older, more traditional, like boomer LGBT person might, right? A lot of the people in my chat are pretty young. A lot of us here are Zoomers, and a lot of us have like really radical positions. Like, I'm sorry, guys. Hypers in chat, if you're gay and 20 years or younger, if you're some kind of gay, some kind of queer, and 20 years or younger, that's quite a few people. I hate to tell you guys this, and I promise you this is true. If you went to most pride parades, gay bars, gatherings of like non-terminally online LGBT people, and you started talking about like gender abolitionism and like the kind of takes that like young Zoomer like queer people on Twitter tend to have, they will look at you like a crazy person, okay? These like 26 to like mid 40s to 50s like LGBT people in gay bars, pride parades, etc. If you walked up to them and asked them like how many genders there are, they'd probably say 2, okay? Like, yeah, there is a unbelievably large divide that as a straight person is even evident to me between the boomer they're not actually, like millennial and boomer generations of like the LGBT community and the Generation Z section of the LGBT community. Something that I don't think a lot of young queer people understand is that if you're a Gen Xer or a boomer and LGBT, you've seen some fucking shit, okay? You have seen some insane fucking shit, okay? Especially if you've been out in any way for a long time. You've seen some serious shit. If you're like a boomer LGBT person, you might be old enough to have participated in the Stonewall riots, okay? Like you in the protests and stuff. You might have been around for that kind of shit, all right? And even if you were like, coming to age in like the 90s, you've still seen some shit. However, things are significantly better now. Does anyone disagree with that? Does anyone disagree that for queer people, things are significantly better now than they were, like, even 15 to 10 years ago? Does anyone disagree with that? So here's where the disconnect is. You've got a group of older LGBT people who grew up advocating for, protesting for, and engaging in activism for just having the right to live their lives without anyone fucking with them, right? Like, gay people being able to, like, get married. Holy shit, thank you. Being able to get married, buy a house, adopt a kid, and just kind of live their life. Trans people being able to identify how they identify, pass well, and just live their life, right? At this point, they've gotten what they wanted. They feel good. They're just like, okay, I'm cool. All right, I'm cool. All right, things are way better now, way better than they were when I was younger. I can more or less live my life right now without having to worry about too much shit. things have gotten way better. If you're like older, right? Then you've got the Gen Z LGBT. The Gen Z LGBT people kind of have a baseline of being in the now. So while the time we're in right now is super fucking pog for LGBT people compared to back in the day, as young people want to do, you're naturally going to be more radical. You're going to want to push the Overton window further and further toward the left. So, whereas you may go to like a gay pride parade in West Hollywood and ask some gay people there, like and trans people there even, how many genders there are, and they might say 2. If you go into like an LGBT college campus club and ask them how many genders there are, you're way more likely to hear shit like, there is no limit to how many genders there are, which is true, by the way. Or just like way more radical takes compared to the kind of stuff that older LGBT people believe. And this is an excuse for like, oh, well, they're boomers, so they don't really get it. That's not an excuse necessarily, but it is a reason. There is a difference between an excuse and a reason. An excuse is an attempt to wave off criticism because of a reason, while a reason is just an acknowledgement of why someone said or did a thing. And it's worth understanding the reason why people say things if you're going to judge them on any moral grounds. I feel like this is a pretty cold take, but, you know, it's Twitter, you know, lefty spear is pretty fucking wild. And at the end of the day, what I think ContraPoints is getting at here isn't really even making fun of these progressive Gen Z Zoomers. I mean, I guess you could argue the tweet is like a little bit mean-spirited, I guess, like somewhat mean-spirited, but at the end of the day, it just kind of comes off as sort of like an irreverent, kind of joking, those damn youngins kind of joke. It doesn't even come off as like they're wrong and they're pushing a harmful ideology. I feel like if ContraPoints felt that way, she would have said it. You know, like, especially if she was going to tweet something like this out, which she would have known would have gotten her into some hot water. Overall, I agree with the sentiment of what I think this tweet means. I do think that, yeah, for a lot of older LGBT people, it's really hard to figure out and relate to and understand younger LGBT people. Because you have different upbringings, a different baseline standard for how society ought to treat the LGBT community. And for older LGBT people, they're basically at the point that they couldn't have dreamed of being back in the day. Like, way back in the day, I'm talking. But if you're young, you've got... Your goal is to make things better than they were when you were young in the future, right? And the same thing's going to happen again. I don't know if you guys realize, but 30 years down the line, when all of you, like, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old, like, LGBT people are now in your 40s and 50s, way up in the future, there's going to be a whole new generation of LGBT people who are going to be roasting the fuck out of you on social media because your beliefs are too antiquated and outdated. You guys know that, right? You guys know that's going to happen to all of you, right? Is even me, right? And I'm not even LGBT, because I'm just, like, active in this community, so I have my takes out there. I'm going to get, like, all of us are going to get roasted well into the future by, like, mega Zoomers, or whatever the generation in, like, 2052 is going to be, the new Zoomer generation. They're going to be dunking on you guys for your ideas being too antiquated, all right? And not radical enough. At the end of the day, I think there's a certain point where to be, like, a reasonable person engaging in discourse, you kind of have to realize that, like, maybe this person doesn't agree with me on 100% of my ideas, but they do agree with me on, like, 85 to 90%, if not more of them. All right? Maybe even more. And at that point, this is where I think that while I do think ContraPoints has missed a few times when it comes to her engagement with, like, the more radical LGBT community, because I am certainly more on board with the radical shit when it comes to LGBT issues, there should be some recognition that, like, you're not doing anything productive by dunking on this extremely influential YouTuber who agrees with you on basically everything. I don't know. It just seems so silly to me to get this upset over this tweet. It is certainly the spiciest thing I think I've ever seen her tweet. And I think like the moment Cherry sent it to me last night in the website chat, I knew it was going to result in like a pretty crazy cancellation. But yeah, that's more or less all there is to say about it. We're not going to really be talking about the people canceling her. I mostly just want to talk about the tweet itself. She did delete it. But clearly it did upset a lot of people, even like people who generally like ContraPoints. It did upset them quite a bit, you know. And even I kind of went, I double took when I first read it because I thought it was like her making fun of the idea of being like a radical, young, progressive LGBT person or pro LGBT person. But over rereading it and kind of like looking it over overnight, coming up into this morning stream, I realized pretty quickly it's very unlikely that ContraPoints is like acting on some form of like hidden internalized bigotry here. You know what I mean? Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. I really do appreciate it. It helps out the channel a lot. Comment down below. ContraPoints is based if you watch the video all the way up to this point. And then, of course, if you want to join my fan Discord or follow any of my social media, they're all linked down below. Fantastic places to follow me if you want to keep up with what I'm doing and what's going on in my life, community, streaming career, etc. And, of course, if you got extra money for it and you don't need it for anything else and you don't know what to do with it, you can always support me financially to help keep the stream going, as this is my main like full-time job, and you know I run basically completely off the support of you guys almost. You can donate to me, subscribe, or gift subs to me on my website, xanderhall.com/live. You can hit the join button to become a channel member on YouTube or Super Chat. You can sub, gift a sub, or Prime sub for free if you've got Amazon Prime over on Twitch. And of course, you can always pledge me on Patreon or donate directly through Streamlabs. No matter how you support me, though, I really do appreciate it. And yeah, have a good one. And I hope to see you next time.